Well, we were supposed to talk to this man live from Dallas, but nevertheless, this man is the equivalent, when you look at MMA properties, of the Dallas Cowboys. That is the value and the worth of his analysis. We had to get it on the program today to break down some of this breaking news. I'm, of course, talking about our friend, MMA Junkie's own, MMA Roadshow's own, John Morgan. Welcome back to Submission Radio, man. We were looking forward to seeing some scenery from Dallas. But the office setup is just too sweet, in the words of Scott Hall. So we're happy to have you on the program.
No, always a pleasure. Yeah. I'm supposed to go home and see the family this week. It's my last week of furlough, man. Our company's reaction to COVID-19 is finally coming to an end. So it seems like we're going to end this era of furlough. So I was supposed to go back and see the family this week, but made some last minute changes. But here I am. I'm at home in Las Vegas, enjoying it.
Yeah, you're like Leo and Wolf of Wall Street. You're not fucking leaving. But it's good to hear that this bloody furlough is at an end, John. We missed our John Morgan goodness, but we're very grateful that we've got you here. Going to talk about some of the latest breaking news that has popped up. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the whole Brock Lesnar situation, but this just in, courtesy of our sexy friend Brett Okamoto, it looks like the UFC are targeting Jorge Masvidal against Nate Diaz. That is going to be, I'll bring up the tweet. So it can be semi-professional. They are targeting it in January for the 12th of the 12th. So what I wonder is, as far as Jorge's deal going, we saw what happened with Usman. How likely do you think that fight is the next fight for Masvidal? Do you think that one makes sense from a matchmaking standpoint? Do you think it could be a similar situation with Usman where we see a long drawn-out negotiation process? Or do you think this one could be a lot easier? And then you got Nate Diaz also, who also has his own negotiating processes that we're accustomed to.
Well, I was going to say, as you were laying out all the scenario there for Masvidal, I'm like, don't forget the other side of that equation too, right? I mean, Nate's been known to throw a wrench in the plans, but no, it does sound like that's the fight that they're working towards. And to be honest with you, while I don't feel like it's a fight that we necessarily have to see, like, in terms of rankings or where everybody stands in the division, I'm not, I wasn't necessarily calling for this fight, but at the same time, like, who wouldn't be interested in this fight? You have two stars of the sport. They were certainly entertaining the first time around, and it was kind of an unfortunate ending. Now, I would point out that, I thought that the fight was going in a direction at that point already. I didn't feel like, cuts into this fight that we really just didn't know what was going to happen. I think that Masvidal had clearly taken control of it at that point, but I don't think Masvidal wanted to win the fight that way, and I definitely know Diaz didn't want to go out that way. So I like the idea of the rematch. I don't see a lot of other big fights for either one of them. I mean, the name you could throw out, interestingly enough, for either guy is probably Conor McGregor. But I just, man, this pandemic era, I don't know about Conor fighting in an empty arena. I'm still just not sold on the idea of that when I think about what an energetic guy that is, what the type of buzz that he creates in a live venue. I kind of wonder if he even really just wants to sit back and wait until he can do that again. So, it's not a fight that, again, I would say necessarily like, God, I'm so glad they put this together. We had questions that needed to be answered, and we're going to get them. I don't feel that way. But what I do feel like is like, hey, man, it was entertaining the first time around. There's no way when you put these guys in a cage, it's not going to be fun. The build-up will be fun. I think the fight makes sense for those reasons.
I like it as a filler fight. Like, it keeps guys busy. It's almost like any excuse to get Nate Diaz back, I'm happy with. And it's almost the same thing with Jorge Masvidal at this point. Like, him saying that he's going to have a long, drawn-out negotiation process and take some time off to see him possibly back that soon. I like it. But you mentioned the empty arenas. The way they promoted the last one, it was, you had The Rock, you had the BMF belt, it was an MSG. How do you see this one being promoted if it actually happens? I mean, you have to, at least in a gentleman's agreement, have the BMF belt on the line, right? Like, at least Jorge's going to bring it, and Nate Diaz is going to be like, look, we're fighting for that belt. Do you think the UFC will sort of say, all right, it is officially for the BMF belt? And is it going to be kind of weird if you got no Rock and you got no crowd this time because of the pandemic?
Yeah, that's the part I'm really interested in, right? I mean, it was said all along, this is one of one, right? I mean, this is one fight. But now when you do the exact same fight and run it back, are the stakes the same? I don't know. I got a feeling Masvidal kind of likes that thing as a collector's item, if nothing else, man. He realizes it's pretty valuable, and I think even when we talked to him ahead of time and say, he was like, look, if Nate wants to put this thing on, he's got to put something up on his end too, something for me to gain. Put up some money, put up something else. Why do I got to put up my belt on the line? So I don't know that the stakes will be the same. I definitely don't know if The Rock will be in the building. Maybe he'll be up in that VIP area where they have up there, where sometimes they use it for broadcasts. Maybe they could bring him in there, but I don't foresee him being able. Yeah, exactly, right? Like, I don't foresee him being able to wrap the belt around the winner or anything like that. So, no, I think it'll be different. I mean, I don't think you can market it exactly the same way. I mean, this is a different time. And again, hey, maybe things will change by January, but I know that's not the way that Dana White is thinking. You know what I mean? They're talking about, how about that nugget he dropped the other night that they're building a hotel right now on the property so that they can be completely self-sufficient. That was mind-blowing to think about the levels that they're going to keep this kind of bubble system intact. So I know that that's not the way that Dana White is thinking about promoting fights, and it'd be nice if they're back by January, but I don't necessarily see it happen. So I do think, as far as like video packages and things like that, it'll all be the same. But I don't think they'll put. I could be wrong, but I don't think they'll put the BMF title on the line.
It should be interesting to see if The Rock even has any interest in being a part of the rematch. I imagine we might get a Honky Tonk Man or something like that as a replacement, coming down, holding the title, coming down with the guitar, strumming some tunes. Just quickly on that matchup, though, John, you mentioned it. In the first one, it was quite clear that Masvidal had all the momentum and was sort of doing really well and almost dominating that performance. Do you imagine it's more of the same, or do you think Nate Diaz learns from that initial fight and brings in a bit of a different game plan, knowing what to expect from Masvidal this time?
Yeah, I think he's going to have to make some adjustments, right? I mean, that's kind of the way I thought that fight might play out. But at the time, Masvidal was riding this incredible wave of momentum, right? I mean, he was firing on all cylinders, and that kind of changed a little bit over the summer. Losing the title fight again on some very extreme, extenuating circumstances, but still, I don't feel like he has quite that wave of. He kind of had some invincibility around him at the time, right? It was like he was this, Conor McGregor that was just calling a shot and then doing it, So we'll see. I think overall, I kind of like Masvidal in the rematch regardless, but I think the adjustments are exactly right. I don't think Nate can come out and fight the same fight. It did not work the first time around, and it's difficult. Masvidal knows how to stand in a brawl. He's not going to be backing down, so we'll see how it plays out.
Well, another welterweight news right here. We've got Kamaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns. Title fight targeted for UFC 256 on December 12th in the US, and that was first reported by TMZ and, of course, spread out by our gorgeous friend Brett Okamoto. That's going to be on the same card as Amanda Nunes versus Megan Anderson's title fight there as well. A bit of significance for the Australian fans, hoping that Megan can sort of pull the upset and win the title there. But speaking of this matchup between Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns, what do you make of Burns at finally getting another crack at the title? And did the UFC go the right way here, or was Leon Edwards potentially the guy to go for the title shot, in your opinion?
I feel so bad for Leon Edwards, man. This whole, watching this pandemic era of MMA has been interesting, right? Because there have been some people that have really been able to capitalize on it. You look at a guy like a Khamzat Chimaev, what he did in Fight Island, a Tanner Boser. I mean, there's people that have made quick turnarounds and really capitalized. Gilbert Burns, perfect example of making, advances that maybe he wouldn't have been able to make otherwise by filling in when other people haven't. Leon Edwards, I think, it deserves a top-level opportunity. I mean, him and Masvidal, to me, would be an interesting fight that really does mean something. But, it's clear that Masvidal doesn't really want that fight right now. I think he's made it kind of clear that he feels like, there's nothing there for him. So, I feel bad for Edwards. Overall, though, I mean, look, it's hard to deny what Burns has done. He's a fun fighter, man, and I'm telling you, at welterweight, he's a completely different animal. And man, as great of a champion as Usman is, and as dominant as he can be, I do think this is a dangerous stylistic matchup, and I find it very, very interesting because Gilbert Burns, heavy hands, man. He can hit hard, so you're not going to feel comfortable in the stand-up department, which you think is not necessarily Usman's best spot. Not saying that Gilbert's some K1 superstar, but he does pack some power. But then on the ground as well. I mean, obviously Burns incredibly dangerous. So if you're an Usman that says, I like to get on top of guys and deliver damage from there, I don't know if that's a place you necessarily really want to be. So I feel like, Burns is going to put him in some really uncomfortable spots and some uncomfortable positions. So, overall, I think it is the right fight. You got to go with kind of, striking while the iron's hot, and that's where Burns is right now. But you feel for Leon, man. They hopefully they'll give him something big. Promise it's a number one contender type matchup because, man, he has gotten just kind of looked over and shoved to the back of the pack.
Well, I was going to say, planning-wise, do you believe this is a bit of a plan by the UFC? If, potentially Gilbert Burns gets through Kamaru Usman, like you mentioned, there is a chance. You've got a fresh slew of matchups. If Masvidal beats Nate Diaz, there you go. You got Masvidal, Gilbert Burns. If Covington beats Tyron Woodley, now you've got a Covington, Gilbert Burns sort of new, fresh angle there as well. And, of course, the Kamaru one has some heat as well still. Do you reckon that's sort of a strategic move by the UFC in a lot of ways?
I mean, I think they're probably always thinking about items like that, options that are going to be available moving forward. I think that dictates a lot of what they do. But you're right, it does freshen things up a little bit. I mean, it's kind of like at light heavyweight right now. Like it's kind of sad to see John Jones lead the division because he's been so dominant. But at the same time, when a champion that's been dominating for a while moves out, it freshens everything up a little bit. It gives new possibilities and new options. So, certainly I think there would be some more intriguing fights immediately available to them that maybe aren't available, right now without doing rematches. And again, not that rematches are a bad thing, but I don't know that any of them right now dictate like, we got to see that one with Usman again.
And I guess the other big question is, what do you do with Leon Edwards? I mean, he must be, at this point, the options are just so limited for him of what makes sense and what's realistic. He must be eyeing possibly the winner of, maybe Covington and Woodley. If you look anywhere lower than the rankings, I just don't think it's really worth his time. And the longer he waits, if his plan is, look, I'm just going to wait for the next title shot, it just seems like the UFC is definitely not going to give it to him.
I know, right? That's the problem because I tend to agree with you. Like I look at the rankings and I think, well, what can he do? I mean, where can he go from here? So it's a difficult position for him to be in. In some ways, I feel like he should wait at least this month. I mean, let's at least see what happens with Covington and Woodley. I mean, that's a couple weeks away, right? And then that at least gives you an option. But like you said, it's a dangerous thing waiting too long. I mean, we've seen that happen to multiple people over their careers where they're like, hey, I'm just going to hold out. I know where my spot is. I know what I deserve. The next thing the divisions pass you by because the sport carries on, man. The UFC is not going to slow down for you. So, hopefully he can get booked in a fight really, really soon. Man, I don't know. I thought we'd see him on Fight Island and this next return. I mean, it looks like we're going to have a 5 or 6 week stretch over there. I'd love to see him get a fight, man, because he's got to stay relevant in the division. He's got to get something done and start making some noise again, because I think he was making some noise, And even though the confrontation with Masvidal didn't exactly go his way, at least it was getting people talking and it was getting people interested. And now, man, that's ancient history at this point. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's still there, but I just don't feel like he's a name that outside of the hardcores that anybody's calling for, man. And man, this sport is so much like, what have you done for me lately? And kind of being in the public eye to get those opportunities. So, man, he has got to get, in my opinion, he's got to get something booked quickly.
You can't let an opportunity pass you by in the sport of MMA. And I just see a scenario in my head where there's a press conference with Dana White after an event and someone asks him, what happened to Leon Edwards? And he's like, what do you mean Leon Edwards? We offered Leon Edwards a title shot. He passed it up. Yeah, but we offered him a shot. You don't pass up a title shot, blah, blah. You know what I mean? That is exactly the scenario we've seen happen over and over for a number of fighters.
You know the script, man. You know the script at this point.
And then the media member never shows his face again. And then we message him and say, hey, man, get off the cliff. It's fine. It's fine. These things happen. Speak to John Morgan next time. He'll clue you in. But let's talk about the other breaking news this week, and that is the fact that a man by the name of Brock Lesnar has apparently become a free agent. John, we've seen Brock use this tactic before to increase his WWE deal. And now there's AEW as well, which is owned by a billionaire who has a lot of capital to spend on a guy like Brock Lesnar. Do you believe that we're actually seeing a guy that's interested in coming back to MMA, or is this just another negotiating tactic?
I hate to spoil everybody's fun, but my gut tells me it's a negotiating tactic. Not to say that there's not some realistic, opportunities available that he could look at. You know what I mean? I see obviously, people throwing out the idea of, fighting Fedor and Bellator. How cool would that be? I don't even know if that's available to him. I'm not sure that he's free and clear of the UFC. So I'm not sure if that's worth discussing. But that's the thing with the UFC. I mean, okay, John Jones threw that out there, and I'm sure John Jones would love that. I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that's probably the easiest debut you could make in the UFC heavyweight division, I would think. I mean, there's killers. Like, if you don't get your title shot right away, what's second fiddle debuting against Ngannou? Like, I think John Jones, in terms of testing himself and his body and how he feels, probably feels he could dominate Brock Lesnar. But that's the thing, is the only fight I really see for Brock is the Daniel Cormier fight. And if it's realistic, I do think Cormier, I know he just retired and said he's done, but again, not picking on Brock, but I could see DC going, well, I don't want to come back for John, but I'll come back for that one. You know what I mean? Like, I could see him, you saw the smile on his face whenever Brock was in the cage and shoving him. This guy's like on cloud nine, like he's living a dream, So I think even though DC, I believe he's retired, and I believe he'll stay out of it, I do think he would come back for that one fight. But outside of that, I mean, outside of those two fights, like, what other fight do you think Brock Lesnar at 43 years old and haven't been competing MMA really wants? I mean, do you think he wants to fight Stipe? Do he wants to fight? Does he want to fight Ngannou? Does he want to fight? Does he even want to fight Blades? I mean, I don't know. Following the career of Brock Lesnar was so fun, man, because the amount of star power that he has, I mean, it was unparalleled for such a short career. You know what I mean? You're talking really, him, Ronda, Connor. I mean, those are the only ones that had that next level of superstardom, and it was exciting. It was fun, even if at first it was a little weird, like, hey, here's this WWE guy coming in. I mean, it was fun to cover his career, but I think he has respect for the sport, and I think he understands what it takes, and I just don't believe that he wants to come in and fight these killers in the UFC heavyweight division right now. So I see it more as leverage than anything else, but I believe that he would at least entertain some phone calls and see what's happening. And look, if it turns out that I'm wrong and he does want to come back, you're damn right Dana White will give him a fight, man. He still generates big time interest. He gets the mainstream, he gets the casuals in the bar. In fact, that was at the bar just the other night, man, and somebody was asking me about this. I mean, it's somebody that knows what I do for a living but never talks to me about MMA because they don't know anything about MMA. So it's just, hey, what's going on, that sort of thing. But then they're like, hey, man, this Brock Lesnar thing, is he going to fight again? I was like, yeah, this is what gets you into it. So, if he's real, I mean, I think the UFC will certainly entertain it, but my gut tells me that this is a negotiating tactic.
It's funny because, like you mentioned, a lot of fans that are sort of follow a bunch of sports love Brock. I don't want to say MMA fans love Brock because as soon as the news comes out, I feel like so many people have been burned and so many people have been sort of over the fact that he's lied about coming back and not that biggest on his career because of the issues with USADA. A lot of people are pretty negative about him when it comes to MMA fans. But I'm just wondering, from your perspective, I mean, a guy like Francis Ngannou, we've seen Brock come back to fight Mark Hunt. You could argue Mark was in his prime, and that was a dangerous man. Do you see a situation where the UFC sees Francis Ngannou and an opportunity where, you could build up Francis from a huge Brock Lesnar fight, especially during these days where it seems like smaller cards are not as big of a card will draw a pretty big pay-per-view revenue compared to before?
It would be interesting, right? Because I think it really would move Francis' star power up. I mean, you would get him in front of eyeballs that wouldn't normally watch him fight. And obviously, as we all know, it doesn't take more than a casual look at Francis Ngannou to go like, oh my God, that looks like a very dangerous dude. You know what I mean? So if he were to come in there and get some kind of, massive knockout of Brock Lesnar, I mean, how good would that be for his popularity? It'd be great. But I mean, certainly if they brought that to Brock, I mean, you don't think he would read the writing on the wall on that one and be like, nah, dog, that's not, I'm the A side here. I'm not coming in here to just, be somebody's stepping stone. Like, thanks anyway. I appreciate it. So that's why I don't see it happen. And honestly, it would be pretty interesting, like, if you came to France and said, look, you got two choices. You can fight for the title against Stipe, or we'll pay you double and you can fight against Brock Lesnar. Like, you got to pay me a lot more because I'm not getting the opportunity to fight for the title right now. But I'm sure Francis feels like that's a very winnable fight for him. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting in theory to talk about, but I just don't see. I can't see Brock putting himself in that position. I think if Brock comes back, I don't think it would be for Francis Ngannou, man. Again, I could be wrong, but I sure as hell would come back for that fight.
Can you imagine a world where Brock Lesnar comes back and somehow accidentally beats John Jones? Can you imagine that world?
Or even Francis just out wrestles him for 3 or so rounds.
And the thing is, and we're joking about it, but a guy like Francis, I mean, look at a guy like Shane Carwin, who was, a super dangerous guy on the feet. A guy like Mark Hunt, who's obviously out of shape, and Brock had the USADA issues, but he was able to pull off that win. You just can't. It's one of those situations you just don't know what's going to happen. But I guess the situation as well is, this man would be out and have to be tested quite some time before he can get into the octagon. I'm just wondering though, John, so with this John Jones Stipe situation right now, do you believe he's in contention to potentially take this title shot away from Francis Ngannou, or do you believe that Dana White's statement is going to hold up and that Francis is actually going to get this next title shot?
Boy, John is playing his cards right, isn't he? I mean, the arguments that he's making, you're like, yeah, that does make some sense. Maybe you're right about that. I mean, I applaud John Jones for his strategy and what he's doing here. It's interesting because on the one hand, it would be a big fight for John Jones, right? I mean, it really would be the light heavyweight GOAT moving up, fighting for the heavyweight title. But for me, I think you make him wait, and here's why. Because I honestly believe that John Jones versus Francis Ngannou as heavyweight champion is even bigger. So if you do Stipe versus Ngannou first, then you either still have Stipe as champ, and that's fine. That's what you're talking about with John now, or you have John versus Ngannou, which I think a lot of people were really interested in. I know I was interested in it when John first floated the idea of it. Now add in the fact that it would be for the heavyweight title if Ngannou were able to beat Stipe. Man, I think that would be on another level. So I think the smart play for the UFC is to let Stipe and Francis fight right now, because you don't necessarily lose any available fights by having that happen. And I think you tell John, to hang on and wait for a little bit. And that's also going to give John more time to, to bulk up and to put on the muscle that he wants to do and get himself built in the division. So to me, I think that's how you let it play out. If I'm the UFC, I know that's what Dana said so far. Obviously, things can change in a heartbeat. And listen, timing will change everything too. I mean, when does Stipe want to fight again? I don't know. How long is John actually willing to wait? We'll see. I mean, I would think if Stipe is willing to go, end of year or very early next year, that you just tell John Jones to hang out and let him know that his shot is after that. Because then, like I said, you've got two options available for John Jones, either one of them, which, could be big. But I think that him and Ngannou might even be a bigger fight.
Big fights on the horizon. Just lastly, as we let you go, John, and this is about the Brock Lesnar thing, and arguably for me, one of the biggest questions is, we saw Brock Lesnar and the UFC's failed negotiations last time around. Essentially, the UFC didn't seem like they wanted to pay Brock Lesnar what he thought he was worth, in light of, the ESPN deal and pay-per-view revenue being sort of different. And Brock Lesnar seemed to think, oh, I don't really like that. I'm not interested. So let's say, hypothetically, Brock is actually serious about maybe coming to the UFC and having another fight. What is different what is different now compared to last time as far as the landscape? Do you think the UFC would even be able to meet Brock Lesnar's price, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I mean, that factors into it too. Like, what's different? We have no live gates now, so that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing when you're talking about value, right? So, I mean, you're right about that. Like, I don't see anything that's changed to the point now where I'm like, oh, well, so much more valuable now. You know what I mean? And this is why it works. So that's why I it's fun to talk about. I mean, like, look at this ridiculous fight poster that went out the other day, right? The fake fights at Tyson Ranch. I mean, those are like, Vanderlei and Vitor, man. You know what I mean? It's like, what does that fight have to do? But it was fun to talk about. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, these are names that people recognize. And so, again, Brock coming back, it's fun to talk about, but I don't know, man. I just don't see it happening. As you said, I just don't think the math works out for everybody involved. And I don't see what exactly what he'd want to do. Look, maybe Brock would be willing to fight John Jones because he sees him as a smaller guy, but John's given time to bulk up a little bit, and he's got the range on him, and he's certainly got a much more rounded skill set. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I just don't feel like this is real. I don't feel like Brock is eyeing anything. I don't think he wants those fights, man. I think he wants to just negotiate well and get himself paid again and make sure he's got the biggest contract possible when he's ready to wrestle again.
What I love about that Tyson Ranch poster is, if you imagine it like in Happy Gilmore, you would see Vanderlei Silva versus Vitor Belfort fighting in the background in the garden, just randomly in your mind, if you imagine what it would look like. Guys, you can follow the man on Twitter at MMA Junkie. John, of course, check out the MMA Roadshow. John, we love your coverage. Can't wait to see you back in action. And thank you so much for joining us on Submission Radio. Enjoy the rest of your furlough, man. Yeah, do something special over there.
Try to enjoy it, man. It's at least we're putting this in the rearview mirror, and at least me personally, we're moving forward from COVID, so I'm excited about that. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks so much, John. Appreciate it, man. Catch up.